Welcome to the Men's Forum. I'm your host, Gary Costanza, and tonight we're going to show the first of 3 parts of a wonderful piece I caught on PBS. It's hosted by Fred Barnes. It's called The War on Boys. Very interesting, a lot of interesting people on it. It tackles a very important subject that's very neglected in the media, namely helping our boys. There's been a lot of propaganda put out by some feminist organizations that purport to say that girls are shortchanged and we need to give girls special attention, when the facts are, as you'll see, as many times on this show we've highlighted, that boys are in trouble in many different ways, almost exclusively, and the girls are actually doing fine. This is going to be, as I said, part 1 of The War on Boys. And in successive shows, we're going to show parts 2 and 3. I hope you enjoy this. Here it is, The War on Boys.
National Desk, issues on the public agenda.
If we don't change the way we treat boys, we'll be heading for gender Armageddon.
As a college teacher, I became aware there were a lot more girls in my class than boys.
Is there anything anyone likes about masculinity?
He'd take a Barbie doll and shoot with it.
Your generation's making up disorders like ADHD and ADD.
They have finally gotten the power to suppress our children with drugs.
Hello, I'm Fred Barnes, and this is the National Desk. My current assignment, well, frankly, this isn't a breaking story that I could easily sum up with a clever line, because it's too personal to me for that. And by the time we're done here, I hope it will be to you as well. It's probably the most meaningful area I've ever tackled. It deals with what's happened to America's boys, the little ones, the preteens, and even the adults. And it's not very pretty.
It seems that our culture's turned everything backward. The girls now should be boys. The girls should be running corporations and at the head of the military and should be Blue Angels and should be everything the boys have been, not because they have the choice, but because they should replace boys.
It's kind of discouraging, you know, to know that a woman might be able to get a job ahead of me, because it's not really, I'm not being treated equal. I might have performed better. I might have done a better job, and yet she got picked. She might have been worse than me.
Sometimes I feel like there's a collision between the culture of women and the culture of boys.
Well, masculinity is politically incorrect. We're in the midst of a giant social experiment whose consequences we cannot even imagine.
The intelligent man begins with the child.
It's a unisex society. Equality. The position and the status of a little boy and little girl today is one equal.
You can't be everything you want to be because you've had too much attention, and God forbid you should take a slot that a woman can have.
Boys are, as one British journalist put it, at risk of becoming tomorrow's second sex.
That wasn't hyperbole. This isn't Chicken Little screaming the sky is falling. It's real. A time bomb ticking at the foundation of our society. Our search for how this came to be is a fascinating journey that the next hour memorializes. It's a journey over race and class lines, as for example, when I had dinner with Glenn Lowry. We chose the Union Oyster House in Boston, where Jack Kennedy's nightly meal was taken in a booth that now bears his name. There we were, 2 men of wildly different backgrounds and childhood life experiences, yet we were to discover that the difficulties we both faced as dads of young men in this society were a greater bond than the superficial things that separated us. We also wanted to understand this problem in a longitudinal way, over time. That meant bringing together men of several generations, not just the boys in the trenches of this latest war between the sexes, but also men of the father's generation, the boomers. We also included representatives of the now hallowed, and properly so, GI generation. We spoke to each group separately, and then we let them loose on one another. And what we observed was startling.
Well, when a male complains that he's not getting equal rights, it's not really regarded as something important, because males are seen to, it's a male-dominated world, and it's seen that we already have enough rights. But when a female comes up to someone, an official, and says, we're not getting enough rights, this and that, it's regarded as so important because it's seen that they don't get enough rights.
I can't think of a day when I didn't fight against the hostile environment. whether it's prejudice by age, whether it's prejudice by religion, size, where you come from.
The sort of like, yeah, tell us how brave you were, Grandpa. I'm the one who's going off to war. I mean, by telling these guys, you know,
Yeah,
I haven't gone through a day that hasn't been hostile, doesn't address their problem.
I realize that, I can understand how they're feeling, which is what I'm trying to say, and I'm just saying you can't. I know what they're feeling like.
Women seem to have said it, and they got great support, and I'm feeling that they feel abandoned by
You know what? Each minority group seems to fight their way out, and that's what you have to do. And right now, guys are becoming the minority group. It's time to fight. That's it.
That's it.
And I don't mean that in a masculine sense, because women are doing it right now. They're fighting back, and now they're taking kind of control, and it's upsetting.
But the unusual set of circumstances is every minority that you've described came from weakness, and these guys are coming from this huge strength. From Adam and Eve through my generation, we had the pie, and I've gotten fat off the pie, and you're telling me that you have less than the half of the pie.
Come with us now on a journey across time. Come to the front lines of the war on boys.
And you know one thing that Joe Kennedy did? He didn't raise his sons the same way he raised his daughters. His sons were raised to be one way and his daughters another way.
He's preparing his sons to run the country.
Right. He knew there was a difference between girls and boys, that's for sure. Though you may have known some other things as well. You maybe taught him some bad lessons. How old are your kids, 6 and 9?
Yeah, Glenn is 9. Nehemiah is 6.
Glenn, is he junior?
Yeah, he's Glenn the second. The 6-year-old last year was in a play, the first graders and the fourth graders at Brookline
Those can be fun.
School. One scene that I remember very well is there's this father whose son wants to play with a doll. So you've got the little kid, and you've got one first grade kid with the doll, and then you've got a fourth grade kid dressed up as the dad. And he takes the doll away from the kid, and he gives him a baseball glove. And the kid keeps throwing the baseball glove down and picking up the doll, and the dad keeps coming back with the baseball glove and taking the doll away. Okay, so free to be you and me. What happens is Grandma comes in, chastises Dad for not allowing the kid to be free to be you and me, takes the baseball glove and throws it in the trash and gives the kid the doll. Tells the kid, this will help you grow up and be a good daddy. First of all, what's wrong with wanting your boy to not play with a doll but to play baseball? I mean, there's nothing that needs to be fixed there. That seems to me. Secondly, what's a grandmother doing coming telling a father how to raise his kid? I mean, that's so, and this goes by without comment. It's just so natural a presumption that this would be the way you do it that the question doesn't even arise. I got the impression that I was the only person in the room who was squirming in his seat.
Like most Americans of my generation, I welcomed the change in the way men and women saw themselves, dealt with one another, and built their lives together. For generations, the relationship between men and women had been more or less unchanging. Of course, in America, the struggle for equality was hastened by the reality of the harsh immigrant life in our cities and the demands of the opening of the West. Both of these chapters required relative equality between the sexes. Then, with World War II, women pushed their horizons as an indispensable part of the war effort. The 50s saw labor-saving devices that helped free women from household drudgery, and perhaps even more importantly, the birth control pill that increased personal choice 1,000-fold. There followed a vast body of literature and film that helped define what was at first called the women's lib movement and would eventually grow into feminism. As a father of 3 daughters, I was relieved to see the world around me becoming more girl-friendly. It was to be a new era. Then came my son Freddie, and I was the dad of a boy. And I would learn that what had begun as a way of improving life and opportunities for all Americans, regardless of gender, had become to many a zero-sum game where the advancement of women was incomplete unless it was accompanied by a retreat in some way on the part of men. But men could fend for themselves.
I consider myself an equity feminist, and I am grateful to the women's movement for the freedoms that I enjoy, but there's a large group of feminists who are not content with what's happened. They still speak in terms of gender oppression and patriarchal hegemony. So there were a lot of feminist scholars and journalists who took a very grim view of the society and were just quite desperate to find a way to overthrow the patriarchy. and they were not able to change men, so they decided the best place to focus their energies was boys.
And that was when political goals and agendas replaced the notion of gender equity and defied common sense.
Society's definition of what it means to be a boy has definitely changed in the last 30 years. Snakes and snails and puppy dog tails, that's what little boys are made of. Sugar and spice and everything nice, that's what little girls were made of. Well, now we see with feminism that snakes and snails, puppy dog tails, sugar and spice, they're all supposed to be mixed together in this ugly stew.
It was quite clear that society treated little boys and little girls differently. And we were told that this was a matter of choice, and that if we raised our little boys like we raised our little girls, why, everything would turn out wonderfully. In short, what was normative for girls was to be decreed as normative for boys.
In my book, Real Boys, I asked one mother, how are you going to educate your children? And she said, well, I'm sending my daughter to an all-girls school. I said, why? And she said, well, I want her to get her voice and be able to speak herself and be anything she wants to be. And I said, well, that's interesting. And your son? And she said, oh, no, he has to go to a co-ed school. And I said, well, why? She said, well, he has to be civilized.
The culture has forgotten for so many years that boys and girls are boys and girls, that they're set up a certain way, their brain systems are set up a certain way to process data a certain way, and their hormones are set up for them to act a certain way. And so, from the beginning of time, cultures have needed to take boys and treat them a certain way so that they grew up well. They've needed to provide a certain kind of supervision, discipline, structure for them. They've needed to provide learning opportunities that fit them. So that's the... I think that's it, basically. The culture just doesn't understand the creature.
But to say society doesn't understand the creature is not at all the same thing as saying that society has no understanding whatsoever of the problem. On the contrary, subtly, and with increasing speed over the last 30 years, there grew up a conventional wisdom that there is no difference between boys and girls. That, in turn, became a dissertation on how girls are disadvantaged. The major proponent of this has been the American Association of University Women.
But one of the questions we had to ask ourselves, and particularly our educational foundation had to ask, was will there be the scholars and the leaders in the 21st century if we don't address the problem today of girls in schools? And our answer was, we're not sure. That the problems were so severe for what is happening to girls in schools that, quite frankly, it's a self-serving proposition. If we work on girls today, we'll have more members, college graduates.
Girls have strong proponents in the feminist organizations. So there are all sorts of women's groups marching in sisterly solidarity, pushing the interests of girls as they see it. I'm not sure the interests of girls are those that the feminists have delineated, but they do have these groups. The AAUW.
In 1992, we released our very seminal work that was called How Schools Shortchange Girls. And in that study in 1992, we identified the conditions under which girls learn in classrooms and the conditions under which boys learn in classrooms. And what we found was that there was a difference in terms of the exposure that girls got. We also learned that girls are still falling behind boys.
Well, I think boys are failing. I think boys are failing in school. In 8th grade in coeducational public schools, boys are 50% more likely to be left back. From K to 12, they're 71% more likely to be suspended. 67% of all of our special needs classes are boys. This year, 9 out of 10 children who are called ADD, attention deficit disorder, will be boys. If you ask 9th graders, do you want to go on to higher education, girls will say 60 and 70% yes, boys will say no. So boys are doing very, very poorly. Boys have a higher suicide rate than girls, between 3 to 4 to 1, a higher rate of victims of crimes. So that's the large national crisis.
Well, I just became concerned, both as a mother of boys, as a college professor who meets lots of young men and women in my classes. I was concerned that people were just badly misinformed about how young men and women are faring in the society. As a college teacher, I became aware there were a lot more girls in my class than boys. And not just my classes, in college classes across the country. There are more women than men in college. And I just started to question whether or not girls were behind in any area. And the more I looked, I found that girls are in ascendancy, girls are thriving. It's never been a better time to be a young woman than contemporary American society. And the boys are not doing as well.
Well, I think there is a crisis, and I just want to say that when you look at the number of our boys who are dying from homicide, the huge number of boys that are dying from suicide, I mean, people don't realize that girls and boys, up until about the age 9, they kill themselves at about the same rate. By the time boys get to be 19, they are killing themselves 6 times more often than girls. What is it so terrible about being a boy that they don't want to live?
If we don't change the way we treat boys, we already see where we're heading. We've seen the school shootings. We've seen the push to more incarceration. You only build so many jails. You can only try so many 11-year-olds as adults. We'll be heading for gender Armageddon. And at the very least, we'll be heading for a society where the newly empowered girls who become women can't find men to connect with. And since about 94 or 5% of women who want to marry men, where will they be?
Where will they be? One can only shudder to think of it. The question is, was this devastation of boys the only possible response to the American Association of University Women's Studies? Well, as you'll see later, and in detail, these studies were so flawed, the science was so bad, that they should never have been embraced by educators in the first place. But by the time people discovered these facts, it had become the unassailable, politically correct truth.
I mean, I didn't grow up in some, really tough, gang-ridden inner city. It was a working-class, middle-class community. But, like any place else, there were gauntlets that had to be run. There were bullies that had to be faced.
There was some kid who sent me home crying about 4 or 5 times, and finally I beat him up, and he never bothered me again.
Defending yourself. Not letting yourself get pushed around, fighting back. That was regarded as a necessary rite of passage for boys in the city.
Well, masculinity is politically incorrect. I was at a conference recently with a number of people. I won't mention the names, but I asked the question of these people, and these are people in the boys' field. I mean, these are all people who are writing books on boys and studying boys. And the dialogue for a number of hours went on about how troubled boys are and what a problem they are and so on. And I said, is there anything anyone in this conference likes about masculinity? And everyone said, well, a few voices said, well, first of all, we have to deconstruct the term. We don't like the term. So I said, okay, is there anything you like about boyhood? And one person said, what I like about boys is that they're really curious. And another person said, well, girls are curious too. So, the problem there is not only is masculinity something that we despise right now, but if there's anything we ever find about boys that we like, we have to be very quick to say, well, but girls do it too.
When women are better than men, they'll put it on a pedestal, And when guys are better than women, they just kind of downplay it a little bit to say, like, oh, we're equal. See, up here, we're equal.
We have 3 myths that we substitute for what a real boy is. One is that boys will be boys. By the way, we usually say that when boys have done something egregious that we hate. We say boys will be boys. And by that we usually mean it, that where there are boys, there's testosterone. Where there's testosterone, there's aggression, and boys are naturally aggressive. Now, by the way, testosterone does have an effect on boys. It does make them different than girls.
A little boy is asking, Mom, are girls better than boys? Mom, well, girls are different than boys.
It does make them a little bit more irritable at times. It does make us as men sometimes a little bit more assertive, aggressive with a small a.
Girls are often more verbal than boys, and girls are usually less physically aggressive than boys, and girls almost always mature faster than boys.
And what I mean by that is that we'll assert ourselves, maybe be a little more dominant. But I think society sees boys as more likely to be aggressive with a large A and violent and dangerous.
So is that a yes? Yes. And then the father says, what?
At this same conference that I was at, people were just really down on aggression. There was nothing they liked about aggression.
Well, I feel boys are natural roughhouses. They have to be active and physical and be very competitive.
And I said, is there anything you like about competition? And they said, no.
Girls' sports is so much less competitive. Guys are more competitive, they want to be competitive, they want to win. It's just like in their nature.
And I said, is it possible that competition is a nurturing activity? No. Is it possible that aggression Isn't aggression a nurturing thing in our culture? No. Well, these are people who have not made peace with masculinity, because masculinity is testosterone-based, and testosterone, when it's channeled, builds our culture.
I think it was really bad for kids when Little League got integrated. I think it was bad for kids when some of these groups, luckily Boy Scouts is a haven for boys to be boys and to do boy things. We have to be taught that distinctions between the genders is not prejudice. It's not negative. It's not bad for them. It's just recognizing reality.
We're like animals. We have to be, the top male has to rule his ground.
Well, of course, the politically correct corollary to the idea that boys are aggressive and aggression is bad is that boys and men can't express their feelings fully and nicely.
I have like male friends where I could talk to them, like, yeah, you know what? They're like, oh, this girl, man, she's like giving me problems. You know, like, dang, what could I do? And they'll be like, oh yeah, just don't talk to her or whatever, and like, you know, give me advice and stuff. Friends I could go to. Yeah, friends that you can, you know, look for support when you need it. Yeah. You know, friends that back you up, you know.
You know, boys physically armor themselves, right? I mean, they look physically armored with the muscle mass and all of that, and they emotionally and psychologically armor themselves. A lot of this is biological. Boys are driven by a hormone, testosterone. Girls are driven by estrogen and progesterone. Progesterone is a bonding hormone. It exists to bond a mother with her child. That's why the hormone exists. When you ask a 13-year-old female, is something wrong? Do you want to talk about it? What's going on average, you're going to find she's going to talk more about it, and she's going to try to solve the problem by bonding more. Her brain's also set up better to be verbal, and she processes what happened today more quickly.
I think the conversations I have with the guys I'm friends with are much more to the point and just like brief, you know? But if you talk about something with a girl, the same issue, she'll go on and on. You know what I mean? She'll just keep going on and on about how she feels and how you should feel and stuff.
So, men do have feelings, but these friendships they form often find expression in competition and playful aggression, or by just hanging out. It's not the way girls do it, but does that make it wrong or a danger to society?
My bonding, personally, had to do with, I never had any brothers or sisters, so my friends became almost like brothers, but I bonded with some older boys that taught me how to play tennis and taught me how to play baseball, and they were mentors.
I can remember a junior high school friend that unfortunately passed away about 1941 or 2, but he was a very close friend from our junior high school days through the beginnings of college. In fact, he was such a good and close friend, Caucasian, by the way, named my first son after him.
It's a formulation of friendship, and an integral part of friendship is bonding.
Visit baseball stadiums, one baseball stadium a year. And the three of us do that. That is an activity that I look forward to when Max is a little older. But when I go with my buddies, we will talk about any manner of thing. It'll have a view that relates to us as we really are. None of us are women slayers. None of us really have the guts to take our chauvinistic jokes beyond our own private little joke. And to that extent, I see this as rather a male intellectual exercise that would be much different if you introduced a woman to the group.
I agree with you. I think we're all afraid. To be really blunt.
I know you. Well, there you have part one of a three-part series that we're going to be showing to you viewers called The War on Boys. Very interesting and important information, important activist stuff that needs to be brought out into the public. The next two segments, we're going to cover the importance of masculinity and how we should treat our boys as people and understand that they're different from girls. Part three, we're going to talk about the problem of trying to drug masculinity out of existence with this Ritalin. I think society's trying to take the easy way out by just medicating our children, our boys mostly, because they're having problems and we don't want to face the problems that they're having. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next couple of shows. Hope you enjoyed part 1 of The War on Boys. I recently caught a really wonderful website called mensnewsdaily.com. You'll see the graphic up in a little bit at the end. But it really got me fired up because a lot of times I feel like I'm one of not too many people who are aware of men's problems, and or maybe that most men are just stuffing it inside themselves. But no, there are many activists out there. I'm proud to say that there's lots of us, and things are happening. A lot of men and women are fired up, and I'm really excited about new things happening. Like I said, this website, mensnewsdaily.com, you'll see links to other websites. I want to highly recommend Glenn Sachs and Diana Thompson. You'll see those 2 names on that website, and they are really the foremost activists in fathers' rights and men's rights. Believe it or not, this woman, Diana Thompson, is amazing. As well as Glenn Sachs. He has his own website. You'll see that, that link there. But you can actually download MP3s of their radio. These are national radio programs that are broadcast on the web. And what a great technology. Now men and men's issues are being brought to the forefront and not having to rely on national media, which generally is controlled by feminist-oriented organizations. So great stuff's happening. Check those websites. Actually, there's actually something about a marriage boycott in Australia, which it's being talked about in this country, actually. So check that out. You'll see some great stuff. Until next time at the Men's Forum, good night.